Hello everyone, and thank you for attending. I'm going to be talking, as Martina mentioned, about the use of gums in plant-based meats. I have to ask each time for Geza to change this screen, so yes, next slide please. Right, and again, click again. So what are food gums? Most people when they think of food gums think maybe chewing gum or gummy bears. These are not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about hydrocolloids. Now their common name is food gums, but they're actually hydrocolloids. So where do they come from? How they're made? Forgive me if you already know all this. It occurs to me that there are people out there who won't know. So they come from plants, algae, bacteria, animals. And in the case of some of them, they come from the cell walls of algae. So that would be carrageenans and alginates. And fruit, that would be pectins. In the cell walls themselves of every single plant there is in the world, there will be cellulose. And that's the basis of the cellulose gums. They'll ooze from the bark of trees, like gum acacia, or what's the other one, tragacanth. A bit like maple syrup, only a gum. They're found as a protective shield around bacteria. And these could be things like xanthan gum. And finally, for things like gelatin, that will be in the hooves, skin and bones of animals. And it occurs to me I've neglected things like guar gum and locust bean gum, which is technically from fruit, but they're the seeds from trees as opposed to the fruit that we associate with fruit. Next slide, please. So what are they chemically? Now, hydrocolloids are very long chain polymers, very complex in some respects, some less so. Some of them are ionic, some are non-ionic. Now, if you're not familiar with ionic and non-ionic, ionic interact with everything. They are a real pain to work with because things can go unexpectedly. Non-ionic are more reliable because they don't interact so much. All of them are basically carbohydrates, not digested by the human body, and so they have very few to no calories. The animal origin ones like gelatin, collagen, etc. are digested and therefore have protein calories. Next slide, please. So what do they do? Now this is where it gets almost humorous because they thicken or they don't. Some of them are so ridiculously thin that you'd think they had no thickening ability at all. And it's only when you get to about 50% concentration that you get a real viscosity. I'm thinking of gum acacia there. Some of them gel, some of them don't. Some emulsify and some don't. Some will foam, obviously, some don't. A lot of them form films, but the films are quite rubbish, not very good at all. Some ferment in the lower gut and give you all sorts of intestinal problems if you're prone to that. Some don't. So in other words, there's a wide variety of properties, and it really helps to be aware of all of these if you want to be an expert in hydrocolloids or come to someone who does know, because you can use each of those in different ways depending on what you need, but selection is absolutely critical. Next slide, please. So why do we need them in plant-based meat alternatives? To me, plant-based meat alternatives are loosely divided into two sections. There's the whole muscle, big lumps of muscle which are extruded as protein, and they basically look like a chicken breast or something like this. Then there's restructured, which is the sausages, the burgers, all this sort of product. And these definitely do need the gums. The whole muscle don't, the restructured do. Next slide, please. Here we see a soy protein burger. It was made in a mold, so it's holding its shape really well, the with and without. The next two clicks, please. That's the one with, and then you'll see the one without. It just falls apart completely. That is in the cold. Can you imagine trying to process that through a factory or even to fry it? It will simply not hold together. And that was a simple 2% addition of a gum that made that difference. Next slide. So what's the advantages apart from the whole thing holding together? Right, depending on your choice of gums, you'll get cold binding. So you get the forming, the processing, and in some cases, remoldability. So if you do something wrong, you can simply remix it and it forms again. Some you can't, and those are the permanent gelling grades. Some you can actually make oils and fats into an emulsion which stops them from leaching out. Some will give you hot and or cold bite. So if you need hot bite in a meat alternative, you really need a gum or egg white. And we're not talking egg white here, obviously. Succulents, that's the moisture retention so that the thing is moisture in the first place, but you also need that moisture to be released, carrying the flavour out when you eat it. You need hot stability, so the whole lot will stay together during cooking. Next slide. Now, which one to choose? Right, the bad news here is that no single gum does all of this, but one does most of it. The good news is the one that does most of it will do it with any plant protein source. And this can be textured, powdered, fresh, rehydrated. It can be mushrooms, vegetables, any of the textured soys. And if you're into meat as well, it will even do it with denatured meat. By denatured, I mean meat that's been smoked or has been salted. Now, for some, the bad news about this is this gum is methyl cellulose. I don't have a problem with it. I've been working with it for the last 35 years. But next slide, please. So why use it? Co-binding, emulsification, all those things I mentioned, the hot bite, it gels when heated. It releases water when it's eaten, so giving you that beautiful succulence and flavour change. It gives you hot stability. It's also easy to use. You only need cold temperatures and it's sustainable with a year-round production. Next slide. Are there alternatives? Yeah, not really. There are various versions that will give you part of it, but nothing will do the whole lot. I'm referring to myself as a gamekeeper turned from a poacher here because I've worked with MC almost all my working life. I'm looking at this actively. If you want to talk, do. Next slide, please. I'm whizzing through here at the end. Right, we have to stop now. You can look at these next few slides, but this particular reference mentioned flavour as being more important even than texture. So please have a look at that slide when you get a chance and we'll talk.
So thank you, Linda. It was excellent and good to follow. So thanks. We already received a question for you in the Q&A box, so maybe you can already read it for yourself, and we will answer it after the presentation. So then we will continue to Anna Mendes. So Anna, can you yes, unmute yourself, show your screen?
Yes,
yeah,
I can do that. Okay, so I would like to thank first for the invitation to come here to share a bit of my expertise, what I do with you. And so I'm senior researcher at Technical University of Denmark. And just to tell a bit more about us, what we do, we have different projects, but now we are focusing a lot on development, processing and characterization of ingredients with special focus on plant-based. And mostly we have been working with industry on applied research with industry in projects related with the ingredients, formulation, encapsulation and delivery of bioactives and so on, so on. And here you can see some of the applications within the food field that we have been working. That includes plant-based sausages, films, capsules for the encapsulation, again, of sensitive compounds that can be a vitamin, an antioxidant, probiotics, enzymes, so on, so on. But also we did in the past some work about antimicrobial coatings, as you can see here. And because we work on this type of applied research, we like to collaborate a lot with industry. And here, I would like just to bring some perspectives about collaborations, industry, university. And just to start, how it starts to find the right matching collaborators. And how can we do that? Basically, like everything else in life, is about network. Talk with people, go to a fair, go to a conference like this, for instance, or go to whatever kind of event, meet personally, talk openly about your problems, find the relevant people which share common interests, and of course, create some kind of beneficial environment to make sure everyone is engaged and motivated to work together. And if you can find some funding, that will be a big plus, and then you might have all the conditions to start your collaboration with the university in case you are a part of industry. And of course, both companies and university, they definitely benefit from this type of collaborations. I'm assuming that most of you are from the industrial side, so I will just highlight what could be advantages, the main advantages of collaborating with a university. And they are, at the end of the day, if you collaborate with university, you will have mostly a specialized person or people, group of people, working or creating solutions to the problems you are facing or experience in your business. And this can be a way to save some resources, investment, particularly if you apply for external funding, and the access to a broad range of new infrastructure, equipments, and so on, that at the end of the day can be super beneficial to create new businesses or expand the existing ones. And talking about business is not new, particularly here on the previous talks, you heard that the plant-based foods and plant-based meats the markets are growing due to the high demand of this type of products. And when it comes to the meat, to the plant-based foods, so there's clear, obvious differences. Basically, you can just look, even we can see looking at these pictures, when you look to the steak of meat on the left side, and you look to the design steak on the right side, we can see even only by eye that there's clearly differences, and we are not going into the nano microstructure of the food product we are talking about, which is something very important to influence properties like the texture of the food. And although there's many nowadays for new products, new plant-based products, there still is consensual that most of them, or some of them, still lack a bit of the good combination and balance between nutrition, organoleptical, textural properties. And when it comes to the sausages, meat sausages that are mostly made of high protein, of proteins and high saturated fats, which confer good and, let's say, better organoleptical properties comparatively to plant-based sausages, they also fail also in terms of the healthy benefits of consuming this type of products. Besides that, most of them or some of them use casings made of animal intestines. And all of this together goes and brings people or consumers to look more for other alternative products, such as plant-based sausages, which they come also with some drawbacks. It's a market that has also grown, but still there's some issues. And the main problems, the current problems that we see now for plant-based sausages are related with first, the casings that are made of plant-based ingredients, and they fail, or for the reason that they cannot support or stand the processing, the cooking of the sausage when it's fried or boiled. Many of them, they tend to break or open and not hold all the filling together. And besides that, the casing also is an important piece on the sausage that contributes for what is called the snap filling, or all of this crunchiness that the consumer experience when he's eating the sausage. Besides that, also the plant-based fillings still lack a bit of the acceptable organoleptical properties and nutritional value. Although now we have quite good products, I'm talking generally speaking. So, and based on this, it came, and since we are on the protein conference, comes the question: can proteins help to overcome all of these issues? And proteins that are these macromolecules with the interesting complexity that can provide different techno-functional properties like emulsification, gelation, so on, can they really help to make a better plant-based sausage, or in this case, plant-based sausages? And this is why some years ago, a startup called Rootly came to us with their product. So basically, Rootly produces and sells plant-based sausages and mince with the high content of protein and dietary fibers and no saturated fat, which is obviously something interesting in the question of health. So there's theoretically is a very healthy product, and they came to us to try to produce a vegan sausage. So based on this, that they have high content of protein, so we received these minced veggies in our lab, and then we processed them and we play with the chemistry of the ingredients, mostly the proteins, again, plant proteins, to process this this sausage that has the peculiarity of not having a skin. So it's a skinless vegan sausage. So we could make these hangable plant-based sausages with suitable properties comparatively to other sausages, including meat skinless sausage in the market that are not so below. And basically we could do this by playing with the properties of the proteins existing on the minced veggies. And since we don't have much more time, I would just like to highlight a few things. If you are a startup, big companies, they know how to work and operate. So if you lack competences or technical competences, you would like to move on your project, perhaps consider to have a collaborator at university. And if you want to work on these more specific type of foods, consider the different types of plant proteins that can be helping can be a solution to create new food products. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi everybody, Raphaelle here. Thanks Martin, thanks Linda, Geza, Hannah. Pleasure to be here today with all of you. Basically, I'm going to give you a little bit of my own thought and perspective on how innovation and new product development can really bring your idea or your portfolio to the next level. And I'm going to echo some of the points that Anna and Linda mentioned, and also hopefully give you a slightly different approach in terms of plant-based innovation, so that you can maybe see how you implement product development and innovation slightly differently, or hopefully enhance some of the activities that you're currently doing. So let me go through a couple of slides with you. I'm just conscious of time. It's not working.
I could see below the arrows to go to the next slide, or maybe press the backspace button or the arrows on your keyboard.
Yeah, no, it's not working right now. Apologies.
Yeah, you can also skip the full screen option if that would work better. Yeah, now it works.
Okay.
And please check the camera again. Now we don't see you. Yes, here we are. Thanks.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, as well.
Okay, excellent. So as I mentioned earlier, what I was hoping to go through with you is maybe make sure that your activities are aligned with the consumer needs and expectation. also, I'd like to maybe go through a couple of points regarding the portfolio of ingredients that would be suitable to carry out some of the activities in terms of new product development and innovation in plant-based, and maybe give you some pointers in terms of what I would see being some of the elements that could contribute to the success of your ideas or your product in the marketplace. So again, you know, maybe just to reiterate some of the points that Anna and Linda discussed earlier around information from an ingredient perspective, and also maybe in terms of collaboration, what could this bring to your team or to your project. I'm also hoping to give you a little bit of inspiration and stimulate some of the innovation in this category. And again, maybe give you some ideas for your portfolio. So in terms of product development and innovation, what I think is very important here to understand is we obviously have a number of ingredients that can contribute to the formulation. We also have process and technology that are going to modify some of those properties. The product ultimately will be in a packaging, which realistically will be the first and the last interaction that your consumer will have with your product. So it's important to have an holistic and integrated approach towards new product development and innovation. In terms of consumer centricity, and make sure that the offering is aligned with the consumer expectation, I think, again, it's important to try to understand why exactly, what are the reasons why the consumer is moving towards plant-based products. Is it to do with the proteins in terms of animal sources of protein versus maybe more plant-based protein sources? Is it something to do with digestive wellness? Some people are also concerned about sugars and carbohydrate. Sustainability is also very high on the priority list of our consumer nowadays. So I think it's important to understand exactly where you're going in terms of new product development and innovation to make sure that your offering is aligned with the consumer's expectations and needs and demands. So apologies, it's not really working for me. So again, here, I just want to reiterate how some of the aspects that Anna and Linda mentioned earlier around experience, around nutrition, but also around efficiency and sustainability need to be taken into account when you want to develop a new product or maybe expand the portfolio. And all of those different aspects of product development need to be taken into account in order to connect with the target consumer. And maybe just an example here, how plant-based can be seen in many different ways from the consumer perspective. And here we can see, you know, how two different products that can compete with each other in the marketplace realistically have completely different profiles. And I think it's important to understand that in the plant-based space, it's as much a lifestyle that we are talking about as it is about a product. So again, making sure that you understand how this category fits into the overall lifestyle of the consumer, just as much as the nutrition aspect of this category is to be taken into account. So again, here, I just want to maybe make sure that the different aspects of product development and innovation are taken into account, and that the choice that you make in terms of ingredients or in terms of technology, in terms of packaging, in terms of labeling and branding is also aligned with the overall innovation concept, as opposed to maybe looking at those individually. There has to be an element of alignment to make sure that the product comes across as being authentic and transparent from the consumer's perspective. So again, here a couple of pointers that I wanted to give you, just to give you an indication of how plant-based can belong to many different attributes and parameters in the mind of the consumer. Maybe just to give you again a slightly different perspective in terms of what plant-based can mean from the consumer's perspective. There is obviously a strong element of science, and I think Anna and Linda really reinforced that earlier, but there is also an aspect around nature and a connection that the consumer somehow expects from the plant-based type of product. So it is the overlap of those different aspects that need to be taken into account in terms of new product development and innovation. And sometimes, you know, I think people miss the fact that there is an element of naturality and products that are least processed when we talk about plant-based. So there are a number of products out there that are plant-based. However, from the consumer's perspective, the perception is that it is not necessarily aligned with some of those elements around naturality or less processed. So as I mentioned earlier, it's just very important that you take those into account during ingredient sourcing, during formulation, processing, packaging, and branding for your product. I'm just conscious of time here. I don't want to go back to what Linda and Anna said. I think it was very clear. However, I just want to maybe give you a couple of pointers here in terms of how proteins have an important part to play in new product development